Hi guys, in this video I wanted to touch a little bit about the subject of taxation and introduce the somewhat controversial idea that lower taxes within a country might actually result in more revenue coming into the state. Now, to start off with, as a libertarian, I definitely subscribe to the idea that all taxation is a form of theft. Now, I think it's probably more accurately described as extortion. It is akin to the mafia showing up at your house or your place of business to request protection money. And on failing to pay that protection money, they damage your property or they hurt your family or something along those lines. Now, a very similar thing happens out here in the West. If you fail to pay your taxes, you are no longer innocent until proven guilty. You are guilty by default, and the state takes it upon itself to violate your private property rights, to seize assets, property, or even imprison the said person who fails to pay their taxes. There really isn't any, logical difference between the two. Now, with that said, some people will disagree with me, and they would think, well, taxes are simply a membership fee of which we pay to be part of a modern society. And they would point to things like the roads, public schools, and some of the benefits that come from this. To these people, while I understand the argument, it's actually not a rational one. Again, it's akin to if the mafia decided to extort money from people and then turn around and build an orphanage, a child hospital, or even pay for a heart transplant. The ends does not justify the means, and it doesn't change the fact that the means by which the money was procured was via a form of extortion. And again, that's said for the state. Now, I'm not advocating that we don't pay our taxes or anything like that. I think we have a moral obligation to pay as little taxes legally as we possibly can. But at the same time, it doesn't change the fact that it is, a form of extortion. Now, some people try to advocate that, well, the taxes are actually voluntary because at any point a person can pick themselves up and move out to the desert or to the wilderness or whatever the case might be. They can live off the grid and then they don't have to pay any more taxes. Now, the problem with this argument is that it is akin to suggesting that, burglary isn't really burglary if you don't own a house. Or that, a car theft is actually not a car theft if you don't own a car. And of course, the logic in that is ridiculous. When the circumstances are met, if a person breaks into your home and you own a home, it's intrusion. In the similar way, if you own a car and somebody steals the car, it is still theft. So even though you can try to avoid the crime or the theft in some kind of capacity, doesn't change the fact that the method by which it's proclaimed, when the circumstances are met, it is still a theft. For it to truly be voluntary, for it to truly be in that capacity, there would have to be no threat of force. People should voluntarily be able to contribute towards the state, contribute to the programs that they agree with and which they don't agree with. But of course, we know that's not the world that we live in. So the fact that there's always the threat of force and the repercussion of that is the violation of human rights still amounts to theft in my understanding. Now, you can have the moral argument to say, well, is it right to steal money from people to give to something that you agree with, such as a charity or something like that? There's a great video that was done by Reason a while ago. I will put links in the description below. And, we could have the debate. In my opinion, I think, a certain amount of taxes should be paid. But at the same time, I'm under no delusion to try and pay more taxes than I legally should. There are a lot of methods and a lot of legal ways out there to reduce my tax burden. And I, of course, try to take advantage of all of them. Now, with that said, I would like to briefly introduce you to the concept of what's known in economics as the Laffer Curve. Now, in the 1970s, Arthur Laffer pioneered this idea, understanding how revenue is collected by the state given a particular tax rate. And it was the completely unremarkable idea that if the tax rate of any given country was zero, you could expect the revenue from the state to be zero with no taxes. But similarly, on the opposite extreme, if the tax rate was at 100%, there would be no incentive for people to work. And as a result, people would actually go out of their way not to pay anything. And the same way the government could expect to receive zero income if the tax rate was at 100%. So what this actually means in the graph and the chart that he's pioneered is that the taxes and the revenue that is collected by taxes does not go up in a straight line. It's actually kind of a curve, or some people say it's a hump. and that at some point there is a peak that is reached with the revenue that is capable of being extracted from an economy. And at that point, any further tax increases actually results in less revenue coming into the state, as less money is available for investment, for employment, and these other types of things. And that usually results in less productivity, more offshoring of money, more tax evasion, and these other kinds of things. But the flip side is also true, that if the tax burden is light enough and it's small enough, people are not going to go through all of the problems, the hoops, and whatever legal loopholes that they're looking for to try and offset such a small payment. And they're more likely to report their money to whatever tax revenue institution they have in their country. So this was something known as the Laffer Curve. Now, it's not a law. It doesn't apply in every situation. There are some areas like in corporate taxes and stuff like that where it's actually more beneficial. But again, it's a principle to help people understand why lower taxes leads to greater economic growth, greater investment, and an overall larger size of the economy. And they're getting more revenue coming in as the economy grows rather than trying to extract it through pure taxation. Now, again, if you're interested in this, I will put a link to a 3-part series below if you want to learn more about the Laffer Curve. And again, in this country, Trinidad and Tobago, and the country, the UK, and all around the world, there are a lot of places that are actually experiencing revenue shortfalls, and they're trying to tax their way to try and make up that shortfall, and that actually may in fact have the opposite effect of reducing revenue or sending businesses offshore or whatever the case might be. There are a lot of good examples where less regulation and lower taxes have actually improved the economic situation of a country. The greatest example of that, of course, was World War II, post-World War II Germany. After they were pretty much decimated during the Second World War, they were actually recovered a lot faster than even the UK, which won the World War. It was called the German Economic Miracle. And for more information about that, I will put links in the description below. And my last thought on that is, taxation is really an odd situation. I've heard it described as somebody trying to take blood from your left hand, and they're trying to move it across to your right hand while spilling a little bit, and then they re-inject it into your right hand. And that's what they consider like economic stimulus. But the fact is that the government generally does not produce anything, does not produce any kind of wealth. All wealth is generated in the private sector, and the more we remove resources from the private sector, to put into state enterprises and to pay the bureaucracy, and as I call it, the Leviathan, there's less money for investment, economic growth, and these other things. And if that burden becomes too big, you actually get contractions and other kinds of problems. So, yeah, it's a broad topic. I just wanted to touch on it. I didn't even get into the Hauser effect, which is it's believed that there's a limit to how much money can actually be extracted from a particular economy. No matter what the tax rate is, it's between like 7 and 8%. That's a video for another time and stuff like that. But I just wanted to introduce the concepts and explain my views on this. Again, I'd like to thank you for watching. Be sure to connect with me on social media. If you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. We can have the discussion. I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying this is how I understand things. So as always, be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. And thanks again for watching, guys. Take care.